critical mistake by shifting blame for the crisis outside the organization, the Taiwanese government, when the company had not checked to make sure that it was not responsible. King Carbon then capitalized on the uncertainty of the situation in the short term, but when an internal investigation revealed that the company's headquarters had received the new state standard, it quickly moved to acceptance. So, I don't know. It's sort of confusing. But basically they say they were good at some things and maybe not so good at other things. More ticking time bombs, I don't know. Do more research. Lay down, Kenneth. Yeah. Enron. Context. These are shady, shady characters. Ken Lay. Jeffrey Skilling. Skilling or Skilling? I can't remember. David Duncan. Oh, he was a good guy. Well, Andrew Fastow. Crazy, crazy people. So basically, and the book talks about also problems with unchecked free market practices. So basically, the first little paragraph here, the first section, is just sort of much of Enron's early success was attributable to deregulation of the energy industry, free market commodity trading of natural gas, blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, Enron did really, really well, but then there were crazy things going on. Enron would be surrounded by the end of 2001. Enron would be surrounded by controversy and one of the worst corporate crises in history, and the verge of bankruptcy. Yeah. So I'll let you read more about it, but basically, these guys were crazy. Leadership, not so much. There's just 3 paragraphs, there's 2 sentences in this section. Enron leaders failed in communicating appropriate values to employees, failed to be informed about the organization's business practices, failed to be open to signs of problems. Yeah. So they weren't good. Talked about divergent corporate values. They're all about innovation and creativity over traditional thinking and standard business models. They had this RISE code that you can look at that's on page 128. It sounds really good, but they basically just didn't follow it. It was really about excess, risk, and hubris. Profitability became the barometer of Enron's success. So it's sort of just a case study for profit, 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 profit. Profit, 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 profit. Responsibility to be informed. They talked about how their organization was decentralized in part for flexibility, agility, innovation. But this decentralization made things really, really difficult to track. There's very little oversight. Without any knowledge of business operation, Enron's leaders could also declare plausible deniability. So, blah, blah, blah. Openness to signs of problems? No, they didn't want any bad news. Oh, by the way, I'm making it up. Innovation or just gross? Lay's. Kenneth Lay. Lay's. Have you seen these crazy new potato chip flavors? Biscuits and gravy. Truffle fries. What? West Coast truffle fries chips. New York Reuben. Yeah. So, more Enron. They didn't like bad news. Don't worry, be happy. Bobby McFerrin. Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy. So they're all about, they were not open to signs of problems. They talk about Sharon Watkins, who was this whistleblower, and she ended up getting fired. No, she resigned. But I like this. No bad news, asshole. I can say that because it's a quote. Skilling, for example, once called an analyst an asshole for suggesting Enron's financial statements were incomplete. At the height of the accusations against Enron and mounting losses, Enron executives continued to deny problems and regularly promoting buying Enron stock to their employees and stockholders. They did not like bad news. And then the last paragraph before you make the call is amazingly important. It talks about the bankruptcy and everything like that. But basically it says organizational leaders should place a premium on making sure that they do not willfully accentuate ambiguity and uncertainty through their leadership communication. Organizations should pay attention to their espoused values and code of ethics and make sure that the organization's leadership models those values. Enron had a strong code of ethics, but the counter values of greed, excess, and profitability overrode any of the values espoused there. Finally, leaders needed to be obligated to be open to bad news and signs of problems. Leaders who fail to be open to warning signs of problems are likely to increase uncertainty and ambiguity within the organization. Then you have you make the call, and the summary is just, Enron is a case study of financial crises, which can be difficult because it's sort of complex. But basically, part of it was they were not forthcoming about their problems. There was extreme decentralization, which is very, very problematic, and they were not open to problems. And as you probably know, a lot of these folks were convicted. Kenneth Lay was convicted but died in prison, or actually he died before sentencing. He died of a heart attack before he was sentenced, but he was convicted. And I actually have a link there if you wanted to see what some of the other folks are doing. I think a lot of them are still in jail. So, yeah, these guys weren't good. Godzilla. Okay, the last. Fukushima. I think that's how you say it. This is the last case study in this chapter, and it doesn't have any separate sections, so I just go sort of paragraph by paragraph. The first paragraph is just talking about how funky this whole thing was, because there are actually three things going on. We got the three events. First was the earthquake that created the tsunami. Then the tsunami resulted in an industrial accident at the Tokyo Electric Power Plant, or TEPCO, and then that impacted the nuclear power plant. It talks about it was a level 7 event, but there was a lot of uncertainty about what was going on. It was finally declared unstable December 16th. Almost 18,000, over 18,000 people died from the devastation of the earthquake, but only a few were immediately hurt by the nuclear power plant disaster. And so oftentimes radiation exposure is unknown until later on. That impacts the uncertainty. And then paragraph 3, they just talk about how it was sort of a radiological event, which becomes really pretty interesting and difficult to figure out. It talked about how the Tokyo Electric Power Plant sought to downplay the risks. The government final report on the disaster found a number of problems with the way information was provided. Initially, the government tried to downplay the disaster for fear of creating panic, but I think that's right. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. It's the greatest concern of a radiological event is the impact of public health through exposure, but they didn't communicate that very, very well. They gave bad information, and then TEPCO, they said, was not prepared. The government and TEPCO did not coordinate their communication, and the crisis communication plan seemed inadequate and incomplete. They do have simulations, but for the first 10 days, they talk about the little information was available, and then when the information was provided about the level of radiation exposure, it was highly technical, could not easily be understood by the public. Japanese scientists were also reluctant to discuss the disaster for fear of creating yet more confusion and uncertainty. So. And again, this is sort of a situation where it's sort of novel. It says that radiation exposure is generally very frightening to people because it is both unseen and exotic. That is, we don't really know exotic. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but yeah, it stays there forever, and we always have low levels of radiation. But despite the fact that we are all exposed to radiation, most people become concerned, some would say unduly concerned about radiation, but there's just sort of like, we don't know. We do know ultimately a high dose of radiation is going to give us cancer and all that. So it's sort of out there. Exotic is in, we don't really know too much about it, I guess. And then paragraph 7 was just about the uncertainty. So the fear about radiation, the uncertainty about the levels of the release, the exposure, trauma, destruction from the earthquake, tsunami, created a very challenging context for communication. And thus the confusion about who should provide information result in public being denied access to critical information, which seems to be the biggest thing, that they weren't very good at getting out information. And then they had the you make the call as complex event, and you can sort of read that. But at the end of the day, they are pretty critical, they being our author, is pretty critical of TEPCO and how all this worked out. The lack of preparedness by the nuclear power plant, followed by the high uncertainty crisis, led to several missteps by TEPCO, the company that managed the power plant. A lack of preparation and effective communication skills for managing the uncertainty of the crisis enraged the general public and global audience. The response also created industry-wide questions about the role of nuclear power and radiation levels in our lives. So a very, very important case study that they didn't seem to do all that well. So those are the case studies. That's all I have for you. Hope you enjoy